Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
You want to know how I fell in love with a woman who read the future in ancient cards? It started with a lie, nearly ended with our deaths, and somehow became the truest thing I've ever known. My name is Sarah, and 3 months ago I thought I understood my life. I owned a small metaphysical shop called Mystic Threads in the University District. Crystals, tarot decks, sage bundles, the works. Nothing too serious, just enough mysticism to pay the bills and keep the curious college students coming back. I've been reading tarot for tourists and locals for 5 years, telling them what they wanted to hear about love and money and career changes. Simple, safe, predictable. Then Dr. Lena Hartwell walked into my shop on a Tuesday afternoon that would change everything. She was tall, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun and wire-rimmed glasses that made her look like she'd stepped out of an old library photograph. But it was her eyes that caught me, sharp, intelligent, with a hint of mischief that made my stomach flutter in a way I hadn't felt since college. "I need to see your oldest deck," she said without preamble, her voice carrying that particular authority that comes from years of lecturing to rooms full of students. I gestured toward the display case where I kept my vintage reproductions. "These are replicas of 18th century designs, but if you're looking for something with real age, not those." She moved past me, her fingers trailing along the glass. "You have something older, something real. I can smell the history on it." My heart skipped. Hidden in my private collection was a deck I'd inherited from my grandmother, supposedly dating back to the 1400s, though I'd never had it authenticated. I'd never shown it to anyone. "What makes you think I have anything like that?" She turned to me then, and her smile was devastating. "Because Sarah Chen, you're not just some new age shopkeeper playing with pretty cards. You're a historian who happens to read tarot. I've done my research." The way she said my name made heat crawl up my neck. "Research?" Dr. Lena Hartwell, Medieval History Department. "I specialize in occult traditions and symbolic systems. And you, according to your university transcripts, have a master's degree in European history with a focus on Renaissance mysticism that you're apparently not using." I stared at her. "You looked up my transcripts?" "I looked up everything about you after Professor Aldrich mentioned there was someone in town who might have access to authentic historical tarot materials." Her eyes sparkled with academic fervor and something else, something that made my mouth go dry. "I'm writing a book about the intersection of medieval mysticism and political power. I need to see genuine artifacts, not museum pieces behind glass." "And what makes you think I'll help you?" She leaned against my counter, close enough that I caught her scent, something like vanilla and old books and rain. "Because you're as curious about the real history as I am. Because you've been wasting your talent reading fortunes for college kids when you could be uncovering actual historical mysteries. And because," she glanced around my shop, taking in the crystals and dream catchers and mass-produced mystical nonsense, "because you're bored out of your mind." She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to admit that to a stranger. Even one with eyes like dark honey and a voice that made me think about things I hadn't thought about in years. "I'll think about it," I said. "I'll be back tomorrow." She headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Sarah, the cards you keep hidden in the wooden box behind the register, those aren't reproductions." The bell chimed as she left, and I stood there staring after her, my heart hammering against my ribs. That night, I pulled out my grandmother's deck for the first time in months. The cards were worn smooth with age, the images painted in colors that seemed to shift in the lamplight. I'd always assumed they were elaborate reproductions, but looking at them now with fresh eyes, with Lena's words echoing in my head, I saw details I'd missed before. The paper felt different, thicker. The wear patterns were consistent with genuine age, not artificial distressing. Could they really be authentic medieval cards? I was still staring at them when the shop bell chimed the next morning. Lena walked, and carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a smile that was pure triumph. I brought bribery, she announced, setting 1 cup on my counter. Ethiopian blend, extra dark. And before you ask, yes, I asked your neighbor what you usually order. You're persistent and thorough. It's what makes me good at my job. She leaned against the counter again, and I noticed she'd dressed down today: jeans, a soft gray sweater that clung to her curves, boots that looked like they'd actually been walked in. Somehow she was even more attractive without the professional armor. So, have you reconsidered? I took a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. What exactly are you proposing? Collaboration. You let me examine your grandmother's deck, help me authenticate it, and document its historical significance. In exchange, I co-author the paper with you. Full academic credit, published in the Journal of Medieval Studies. My pulse quickened. Getting published in that journal had been a dream of mine since graduate school. But I'd given up on academic careers when my grandmother got sick and left me the shop. And if the deck turns out to be worthless, then we write about the reproduction, techniques, and how even modern interpretations can illuminate historical understanding. She shrugged. Either way, you get back into the academic world, and I get access to materials no one else has seen. I stared at her for a long moment, weighing risks and possibilities. There was something about Lena that made me want to take chances, to step out of the safe little world I'd built for myself. All right, I heard myself say, but we do this properly. Controlled environment, documentation, the works. Her grin could have powered the city. Dr. Chen, you've just made my year. We spent the next week in the back room of my shop, carefully examining each card under magnifying glasses and special lights Lena had borrowed from the university's conservation department. She was brilliant. I'd forgotten how intoxicating it could be to work with someone who shared my passion for historical detail, who got excited about paper composition and pigment analysis. Look at this, she breathed on the 4th day, pointing to a tiny symbol in the corner of the Fool card. This isn't just decorative, it's a maker's mark. And if I'm right about the style, she grabbed her laptop, fingers flying over the keys. Yes, this matches samples from a workshop in Lyon, dated 1442. I leaned over her shoulder to see the screen, inhaling that intoxicating scent of her hair. You're saying these are actually 580 years old? Sarah, you've been carrying around a museum-quality artifact in a wooden box behind your register. Our eyes met, and suddenly the air between us felt charged with more than academic excitement. She was close enough that I could see flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough that when she moved, her hand brushed against mine. We should celebrate, she said softly. How? Dinner. Somewhere that doesn't smell like sage and patchouli. I laughed, but my heart was racing. Is this still about the research? No, she admitted, her gaze dropping to my lips. This is about the fact that I've been thinking about kissing you since the first day I walked in here. I should have been cautious. Should have thought about workplace dynamics and professional relationships and all the ways this could get complicated. Instead, I heard myself say, I know a place. Dinner turned into drinks, which turned into walking through the university district as the sun set, talking about everything except the cards. I learned that Lena had grown up in Boston, that she'd wanted to be an archaeologist until she discovered medieval texts, that she had a scar on her left hand from a fencing accident in college. Fencing? I asked as we paused under the old oak tree in the campus quad. I was dramatic in my 20s, thought it went with the academic mystique. She rolled her eyes at her younger self. What about you? Any embarrassing hobbies I should know about? I used to write romance novels. Her eyebrows shot up. Used to? Still do, actually, under pseudonym. Very terrible, very profitable bodice rippers. That's not embarrassing, that's amazing. Do any of them feature mysterious historians? Seducing innocent shopkeepers? The teasing note in her voice made heat pool in my belly. Not yet. Maybe you should write one, for research purposes. We were standing close now, close enough that I could see her breath misting in the cool evening air. The campus was quiet around us, just us and the old oak tree and the weight of possibility hanging between us. Lena, I started, but she was already moving, her hands coming up to frame my face. Is this okay? She whispered. Instead of answering, I kissed her. Her lips were soft and warm, and she tasted like the wine we'd shared at dinner and something uniquely her. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. So, she said, her forehead resting against mine. About that collaboration, what about it? I think it's going to be very productive. We spent the next 2 weeks working during the day and exploring whatever was building between us at night. The cards revealed more secrets, hidden symbols, coded messages, even what appeared to be a map of some kind drawn in invisible ink that only showed up under ultraviolet light. This is incredible, Lena murmured, tracing the UV-revealed lines with her finger. It's like your grandmother's deck is part of some larger puzzle. What kind of puzzle? She was quiet for a moment, studying the patterns. I'm not sure yet, but I think these cards were more than just divination tools. I think they were used to hide information. Maybe even treasure locations. I laughed. Treasure? This isn't a Dan Brown novel, Lena, isn't it? She turned to me with that mischievous smile I was learning to both love and fear. Think about it. Medieval period, religious persecution, valuable items that needed to be hidden. Tarot cards would have been the perfect hiding place, portable, seemingly innocent, passed down through generations. Even if that were true, what makes you think my deck is connected to anything like that because of this? She pointed to a recurring symbol that appeared on several cards, a stylized rose with 7 petals. I've seen this before in Professor Aldrich's research on medieval secret societies. Professor Aldrich? She'd mentioned him before, her doctoral advisor who'd apparently pointed her in my direction. I'd been meaning to ask more about him, but we'd been so caught up in our research and our growing attraction that I'd let it slide. What kind of secret societies? Groups that protected artifacts and knowledge during times of religious upheaval. Think Knights Templar, but less famous and more effective. She pulled up files on her laptop. Aldrich has been tracking connections between these societies and hidden caches of medieval artifacts for years. If your deck is authentic, and it is, then it might be a key to finding something significant. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the late hour. Lena, this is starting to sound dangerous. Only if we tell the wrong people. She closed the laptop and turned to me, her expression serious for once. Sarah, what we've found here could rewrite our understanding of medieval mysticism and secret societies. This could be the discovery that makes both our careers. I wanted to share her excitement, but something felt off. Maybe it was the way she kept mentioning her professor, or the way her eyes got distant when she talked about the discovery's significance. What does Professor Aldrich think about all this? I haven't told him the details yet. She stood and started packing up her materials. I want to make sure we have everything documented properly first. Lena, yes. Are you being careful? About who else you might have mentioned this to? She paused, her end stilling on her laptop case. What do you mean? I mean, if these cards are as valuable as you think they are, and if there really is some kind of treasure map hidden in them, maybe we should be more cautious about who knows what we've found. For a moment, something flickered across her face, an expression I couldn't quite read. Then she smiled and pulled me into her arms. You're right to be cautious, but the only people who know are you, me, and eventually the academic community when we publish our findings. She kissed my forehead. I promise I'm not going to let anything happen to you or the cards. I wanted to believe her. And when she kissed me properly, pushing all thoughts of treasure and danger from my mind, I almost did. The next week, Lena suggested we take our research public. I've arranged a guest lecture slot, she announced, bursting into my shop with her usual energy. Next Thursday, the university's medieval studies series. Tarot as historical document, new discoveries in symbolic communication. We'll present our findings, establish academic priority, and get the university's protection for future research. We, co-presenters, I told you, full academic credit. She grinned. Besides, I need the expert on hand in case anyone asks technical questions about the cards themselves. The idea of standing in front of a lecture hall full of academics terrified me, but it also thrilled me. It had been so long since I'd been part of the academic world, since I felt like my knowledge mattered for something beyond telling tourists whether they'd find love. What about the cards? We can't exactly bring 500-year-old artifacts to a public lecture. High-resolution photographs and detailed documentation will keep the originals secure. She paused, studying my face. Unless you're not ready. For this, we can wait if you need more time. I thought about my quiet shop, my predictable life, the way I'd been sleepwalking through the past 5 years. Then I looked at Lena, brilliant, passionate Lena, who'd walked into my world and turned it upside down in the best possible way. No, I said, I'm ready. 2 weeks later, I found myself on stage beside Lena, dissecting the history of tarot for a room full of skeptics. The lecture hall was packed. Word had gotten out about our discoveries, and academics loved nothing more than a good mystery. The cards aren't magic, Lena declared, clicking to the next slide in our presentation. But the stories they tell? Her gaze slid to me, and I felt that familiar flutter in my stomach. Those can change everything. A student in the front row raised her hand. Dr. Hartwell, is it true that medieval decks were used for other purposes? Lena's smirk was pure mischief. Why don't we ask the expert? I stepped forward, grateful for hours of practice we'd put in. Actually, there's significant evidence that tarot cards served multiple functions in medieval society. Beyond divination, they were used for education, entertainment, and yes, sometimes as vehicles for encoding sensitive information. What kind of information? Called out a professor from the back. Location data, primarily. Meeting places, safe houses, hidden caches. I clicked to our analysis of the UV revealed map. The deck we've been studying contains what appears to be a sophisticated geographic coding system, possibly used by groups who needed to communicate covertly. The audience was riveted. Questions flew from all directions about dating techniques, symbolic analysis, historical context. Lena and I fielded them together, our partnership smooth and natural. I'd forgotten how good it felt to be intellectually challenged, to be seen as an expert rather than just a fortune teller. As we wrapped up, I caught sight of an older man in the third row taking notes. Something about his intense focus made me uneasy, but before I could point him out to Lena, we were surrounded by excited colleagues and graduate students wanting to discuss our findings. That was incredible, Lena whispered in my ear as we finally escaped to the hallway. You were brilliant up there. We were brilliant, I corrected, but I was glowing from the praise and the success of our presentation. Celebratory dinner? Absolutely. We made it exactly 3 steps before a familiar voice called out behind us. Lena, magnificent presentation. We turned to see Professor Aldrich approaching, the older man I'd noticed taking notes. He was distinguished in that particular academic way, with silver hair and a tweed jacket that had probably been expensive 20 years ago. Professor Aldrich, Lena said, and I caught a note of tension in her voice. I didn't know you were planning to attend. Wouldn't miss it. Medieval mysticism is still my area, you know. His smile was warm, but his eyes were calculating as they fixed on me. And you must be Sarah Chen. Lena's told me so much about you. Has she? I glanced at Lena, who was looking uncomfortable. Oh, yes, your remarkable discovery, your grandmother's collection. He stepped closer, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne and something that reminded me unpleasantly of my shop's back room. After we'd been working with chemical analysis equipment, I don't suppose you'd be interested in having the university acquire the deck? For preservation purposes, of course, we could offer quite generous compensation. Every instinct I had screamed warning. The cards aren't for sale. Of course, but perhaps a long-term loan. We have excellent conservation facilities and the academic value. Professor, Lena interrupted. Sarah and I haven't finished our research yet. Any decisions about the deck's future can wait. Aldrich's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Naturally. Well, I won't keep you from your celebration. But Sarah, do consider the university's offer. Some things are too valuable to be left in private hands. He walked away, leaving me with a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. That was weird, I said. He's just enthusiastic about historical artifacts, Lena replied, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Come on, let's get that dinner. The encounter had spoiled my mood. All through dinner, I kept thinking about Aldrich's words, the way he'd looked at me, the tension in Lena's voice. When Lena suggested going back to her apartment instead of mine, I almost said no. Almost. But when she kissed me in the hallway outside her door, when she whispered my name against my lips like a prayer, I forgot about everything except the way she made me feel. We stumbled into her bedroom, hands tangling in each other's clothes, months of building attraction finally boiling over. Later, as we lay tangled in her sheets, I traced patterns on her bare shoulder and tried to voice the unease that wouldn't. Leave me alone, Leela? She was half asleep, her hair spread across the pillow like dark silk. Your professor. How much have you told him about the cards? She stiffened slightly. Why? He seemed to know an awful lot of details for someone who wasn't supposed to be involved in the research. Sarah. She rolled over to face me, her expression serious. I need you to trust me, okay? Aldrich is my advisor. I have to keep him informed of my research progress. But I haven't told him everything, and I'm not going to let him or anyone else take advantage of what we found. Promise? Promise. She kissed me softly. Besides, the cards are safe in your shop. No one's going to steal 500-year-old tarot cards from a metaphysical store in broad daylight. Famous last words. 3 days later, I arrived at my shop to find the back room destroyed and my grandmother's deck gone. The police were professional but unhelpful. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no witnesses. A clean, professional job that suggested the thieves knew exactly what they were looking for and where to find it. Any idea why someone would target these particular cards? Officer Martinez asked, surveying the damage. I looked around the room where Alina and I had spent so many hours uncovering the deck's secrets. Everything related to our research was gone, the cards, our documentation, even Lena's specialized equipment. But the rest of my inventory hadn't been touched. They're historically significant, I said carefully. Possibly very valuable to the right collector. Any idea who might know about their value? That was the question that had been eating at me since I'd found the wreckage. The number of people who knew about the card's true worth could be counted on one hand. Me, Lena, the academics who'd attended our lecture, and Professor Aldrich. When Lena arrived 20 minutes later, she took one look at the destruction and went pale. Oh God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. How is this your fault? She ran her hands through her hair, pacing among the scattered papers and overturned furniture. I should have been more careful. Should have insisted we put them in a bank vault or university safe deposit box. Lena, I caught her hands, stilling her frantic movement. Who else knew the exact details of what we found? I told you, she stopped, her eyes widening. You think Aldrich had something to do with this? He offered to buy the deck 3 days ago. Now it's gone. Sarah, I know he's pushy, but he's not a criminal. He's a respected academic. Then who? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the chaos around us. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. I may have mentioned some of the details in an email to a colleague at Oxford, Dr. Reginald Thorne. He specializes in medieval treasure hunts and artifact recovery. My blood ran cold. You told someone about the treasure map? I was excited. This is the kind of discovery that happens once in a lifetime, and I wanted to share it with someone who would understand the significance. And this Dr. Thorne, how do you know him? He was my mentor when I did research at Oxford 2 years ago. She wouldn't meet my eyes. We stayed in touch. Lena, please tell me you didn't send him copies of our documentation. Her silence was answer enough. Jesus Christ. I sank into my chair, the magnitude of what had happened finally hitting me. You sent detailed information about a potentially priceless medieval artifact to someone I've never met in another country, and now the cards are gone. It's not that simple, isn't it? I stood up, anger finally overriding shock. You promised me we were being careful. You promised me you weren't going to let anyone take advantage of what we found. Sarah, please, let me call Thorne, find out if he knows anything about this. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Don't call anyone. Don't send any more emails. Don't discuss this with anyone until we figure out what the hell is going on. Lena's face crumpled. I never meant for this to happen. I know, and I did know that. But knowing didn't bring back my grandmother's cards or make me feel any less. Betrayed by her carelessness, I just thought, Dot, I need some time to think. Sarah, please just go. She left reluctantly, and I spent the rest of the day cleaning up the wreckage and trying to figure out what to do next. The police had been clear that without more evidence, there wasn't much they could do. The insurance on the cards would cover their appraised value as collectibles, but not their true historical worth. More importantly, somewhere out there was a 500-year-old treasure map, and I had no idea who had it or what they planned to do with it. That night, as I sat in my empty shop staring at the space where the cards used to be, I made a decision. If someone had stolen my inheritance to follow a medieval treasure map, then I was damn well going to find them before they found whatever they were looking for. I just had to figure out how to do that without getting myself killed. The answer came from an unexpected source. At 2 a.m, my phone rang. Sarah? Lena's voice was tight with fear. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't go home tonight. Don't go anywhere alone. Someone broke into my apartment. Are you okay? I'm fine. I wasn't here when it happened. But Sarah, they didn't just trash the place. They left a message. What kind of message? A tarot card, the tower reversed. And a note that said, stop looking or join the cards. The tower reversed. In traditional tarot reading, it meant avoidable disaster crisis that could be prevented if you made the right choices. Where are you now? Hotel downtown. Sarah, I think we're in real danger. I think whoever took the cards isn't just interested in their historical value. What do you mean? I called Dr. Thorne after I left your shop today. He never got my email about the cards. His account was hacked 3 weeks ago. The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. Someone's been monitoring your correspondence. For weeks, maybe longer. Which means they knew about our discovery almost from the beginning. Lena, who else had access to your email? Who else knew you were researching medieval treasure maps? A long pause. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Aldrich. We met at the hotel an hour later. Lena had dark circles under her eyes and kept checking the locks on the door. I brought what little documentation we had left, copies of photos I'd kept on my personal laptop, notes I'd made in my own shorthand. Tell me about Aldrich, I said, settling into the chair across from her bed. He's been my advisor for 3 years. Brilliant researcher, but ambitious. Always looking for the discovery that would make his reputation. She wrapped her arms around herself. When I first started working on medieval mysticism, he was encouraging, helpful. But lately, ... Lately what? He's been pushing me to share more details about my research, asking specifically about any artifacts I might have access to. I thought he was just being thorough. When did you first tell him about me? Right after our first meeting. I was excited about finding someone with access to authentic materials. She looked up at me with guilt-ridden eyes. Sarah, I think I let him write to you. It's not your fault, and I meant it. We'd both been naive, too caught up in academic excitement to consider the darker possibilities. But we need to figure out what he's planning to do with the cards. If the map is real, if it leads to some kind of medieval treasure cache, then he's probably already started following it. Then we need to get there first. Lena stared at me. Sarah, these people threatened us. They broke into our homes. This isn't a game. You're right, it's not a game. It's my grandmother's legacy, and I'm not going to let some greedy professor steal it because we were too trusting. I pulled out my laptop. We documented everything, remember? We have copies of the UV analysis, the symbol patterns, the geographic markers. We can reconstruct the map. Even if we could, we don't know where it leads. Then we'd better figure it out quickly. We spent the rest of the night working through our documentation, trying to piece together the clues we'd uncovered. The hidden map showed a series of landmarks arranged in a specific pattern, with the 7-petaled rose symbol marking what appeared to be a central location. These matched geographic features in the Loire Valley, Lena said, comparing our analysis to historical maps. Look, this river bend, this hill formation. It's about 30 kilometers southwest of Tours. That's pretty specific for a 500-year-old treasure map. The area was controlled by several noble families who were known patrons of mystical arts. And during the religious wars of the 16th century, it would have been a logical place to hide valuable artifacts. I stared at the patterns, trying to imagine what my grandmother might have known about all this. Had she understood what she was leaving me? Or had the cards simply been passed down through generations? They're true. Significance forgotten? Lena, if we're right about this, if there really is something hidden there, what do you think it is? Could be anything. Religious artifacts, gold, important documents. Medieval treasure hoards have been found throughout Europe, usually containing a mix of valuable items hidden during times of conflict. And Aldrich thinks it's worth committing theft and making threats to find it. Apparently. She closed her laptop and looked at me. Sarah, what are you thinking? I'm thinking we need to get to France before he does. That's insane. Is it? Think about it. Aldrich has the cards, but he doesn't have our analysis. He'll have to start from scratch, figure out the UV patterns, decode the symbols. That gives us maybe a week's head start if we move fast. And then what? Assuming we find whatever's hidden there, assuming it's actually valuable, what's to stop him from just taking it from us? Evidence, documentation, we make our discovery public before he can silence us. Lena was quiet for a long time, staring at the hotel room carpet. When she finally looked up, her expression was resigned. "You're not going to let this go, are you? Would you?" "No," she admitted. "I'd probably do exactly what you're doing. But Sarah, if we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. Professional. We document everything. We stay in public places, and at the first sign of real danger, we get out." "Agreed. And we're not doing this alone. I have contacts in France, academic colleagues who can provide backup if things go wrong." "Also agreed." She smiled for the first time since this nightmare began. "Then I guess we're going treasure hunting." 2 days later, we were on a plane to Paris. The flight gave us time to plan and research. Lina had contacted Dr. Marie Dubois, a colleague at the Sorbonne who specialized in medieval French history. She'd agreed to meet us and provide local expertise, though we'd been vague about exactly what we were looking for. "She thinks we're researching pilgrimage routes," Lena explained as we reviewed our materials, "which isn't entirely untrue. Medieval treasure caches were often hidden along pilgrim paths." I studied the map we'd reconstructed, trying to memorize the landmarks. "How confident are you about the location?" 70%. "The geographic markers are clear, but 500 years is a long time. Rivers change course, hills erode, human construction alters landscapes." "And how confident are you that we're not walking into a trap?" "Less confident about that," she admitted. "But I keep thinking about that note. Stop looking or join the cards. If Aldrich just wanted us to back off, why not make a cleaner threat? Why reference the tarot specifically? You think he's telling us he's planning to destroy the cards? Or hide them permanently? Sarah, what if this isn't just about money? What if there's something in that treasure cache that's politically or historically sensitive? Something worth killing for?" The thought chilled me, but it also strengthened my resolve. If there was something that important hidden in the Loire Valley, then it needed to be found by people who would protect it, not exploit it. We landed in Paris on a gray October morning and took the train to Tours. The French countryside rolled past our window autumn trees, old stone buildings, vineyards preparing for harvest. It was beautiful and peaceful, which somehow made our mission feel even more surreal. Dr. Dubois met us at the station, a cheerful woman in her 50s with silver hair and paint-stained fingers. "Lena, so good to see you again." She embraced Lena warmly, then turned to me with curiosity. "And you must be Sarah, the mysterious colleague with the interesting research project?" "Thank you for meeting us on such short notice," I said. "Not at all. Any excuse to get away from grading papers." She led us to her small car. "Now, you mentioned looking for medieval pilgrimage sites in the Loire Valley. What specifically are you hoping to find?" Lena and I exchanged glances. We'd agreed to be as honest as possible without revealing the full scope of what we were doing. "We're following up on some documentation that suggests there may be undiscovered historical sites in the area," Lena said carefully, "possibly connected to 5th-10th century mystical practices." "Ah, the occult tourism angle," Marie nodded knowingly. "Very popular these days. Though I must warn you, treasure hunters have been combing this region for decades. If there were major discoveries to be made, they would have been made by now." "We're not exactly treasure hunters," I said. "No. Then what would you call yourselves?" Lena smiled. "Optimistic academics," Marie laughed. "The most dangerous kind." She drove us to a small hotel in a village called Azay-le-Rideau, about 40 kilometers from Tours. According to our analysis, we were now within 10 kilometers of the map's central location. "This area has a fascinating history," Marie explained as we checked in. "During the medieval period, it was controlled by the Comte de Montmorency, who was known for his patronage of scholars and mystics. Many important figures stayed here during times of political upheaval, What kind of figures? I asked. Alchemists, astrologers, scholars fleeing religious persecution. The kind of people who might have needed to hide valuable items for safekeeping. Lena raised her eyebrows at me. We were definitely in the right place. That evening, we studied our reconstructed map by lamplight in Marie's cozy sitting room. The landmarks we'd identified were all within hiking distance, a distinctive rock formation, a bend in the Endra River, and what appeared to be the ruins of a medieval chapel. The chapel is key, I said, tracing the seven-petaled rose symbol. That appeared repeatedly at that location. In medieval symbolism, roses often marked sacred or hidden spaces. Marie leaned over to examine our documentation. May I ask where you obtained these references? Lena hesitated. Family documents? Passed down through Sarah's grandmothers. Line? Fascinating. Your grandmother's family was French? Originally, yes. They immigrated to America in the early 1900s. It wasn't entirely a lie. My grandmother had always claimed distant French ancestry, though she'd been frustratingly vague about the details. Marie studied the map more closely. You know, there are local legends about the old Montmorency chapel. The villagers say it was used for more than just Christian worship, that it was a meeting place for scholars who practiced alternative spiritual traditions. What kind of legends? Lena asked. Oh, the usual rural folklore. Hidden chambers, secret passages, treasure buried by fleeing nobles. But there may be some truth to it. The chapel was abandoned rather suddenly in the late 15th century, and there are gaps in the historical record about what happened there. My pulse quickened. Is the chapel still accessible? What's left of it? Most of the structure collapsed decades ago, but the foundation stones are still there. It's about 1 kilometer up the hill from here, through the forest. She paused, studying our faces. You're planning to visit it, aren't you? Would that be possible? I asked. Marie smiled. I've been an academic for 30 years, my dear. I recognize the look of researchers who found a promising lead. Of course it's possible. But may I suggest we go during daylight hours? The forest paths can be treacherous after dark. We agreed to set out first thing in the morning. As Marie bid us good night, she turned back with a thoughtful expression. One more thing about the local legends. They say that anyone who finds what's hidden at the chapel must be pure of heart and true of purpose. Otherwise, the treasure will slip through their fingers like water. Superstition? Lena asked. Perhaps. But in my experience, medieval hiding places were often designed with, let's call them psychological obstacles, tests of worthiness built into the discovery process itself. After Marie left, Lena and I sat in the quiet hotel room, both lost in thought. Are you having second thoughts? I asked. About the treasure hunt? No. About doing this without telling Marie the whole truth? She sighed. Yes, she's being incredibly helpful, and we're lying to her. We're protecting her. If Aldrich really is dangerous, the less she knows, the safer she is. And if we find something tomorrow, if there really is a medieval treasure cache hidden in that chapel, I considered the question, then we document everything, contact the proper authorities, and make sure it ends up in a museum where it belongs. What about Aldrich? That was the question that had been haunting me since we left. America. Even if we found the treasure first, he still had my grandmother's cards. And he'd made it clear that he wasn't going to let us interfere with his plans. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I said finally. But as I lay in bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the French countryside, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something much more dangerous than a simple treasure hunt. The next morning dawned gray and misty, perfect weather for hiking through medieval forests in search of lost artifacts. Marie arrived early, with a backpack full of archaeological tools an enthusiasm that made me feel even guiltier about our deception. I brought ground-penetrating radar equipment, she announced. If there are any hidden chambers or buried objects, we should be able to detect them. The hike to the chapel took us through dense woods along paths that had probably been used for centuries. Ancient oak trees formed a canopy overhead, and everywhere there were signs of the area's long history-old stone walls. Forgotten foundations, carved markers worn smooth by time. There, Marie said as we crested a small hill. The chapel of St. Roseline. What remained of the chapel was mostly foundation stones arranged in a traditional cruciform pattern. But even in ruins, there was something evocative about the place, a sense of age and mystery that made the hair on my arm stand up. The altar would have been here, Marie explained, pointing to the eastern end of the ruins. And these side chambers. Interesting. This architectural style suggests the chapel was designed for more than just standard Christian services. I pulled out our reconstructed map, comparing the landmarks to what we could see around us. The river bend was visible through the trees to the south. The distinctive rock formation rose to the north, and we were standing at the exact center of the pattern. Lena, I said quietly, we're here. She understood immediately, pulling out the UV lamp we'd brought. Marie, would you mind if we took some photographs before we start with the radar? Of course not. While Marie set up her equipment, we moved systematically around the ruins, checking every stone and surface under ultraviolet light. For 20 minutes, we found nothing but ordinary weathered rock. Then Lena called out softly from the northern wall, Sarah, come look at this. Under UV light, the stones revealed the same hidden symbols we'd found on the tarot cards, roses, geometric patterns, and something that looked like written text in a script I didn't recognize. My God, Marie breathed, appearing beside us. How did you know to look for UV reactive markings? Family stories mentioned invisible symbols, I said, which was at least partially true. Marie examined the revealed markings with professional excitement. This appears to be a form of coded Latin. Medieval scholars often used invisible inks, made from organic compounds that would fade to invisibility but could be revealed under certain conditions. Can you translate it? Lena asked. Some of it. This symbol here means beneath or below, and this one, 7 steps to the rose. It's instructions of some kind. I felt my heart racing. We were actually going to find it, whatever it was. Marie, how quickly can we get that radar set up? She grinned. Give me 5 minutes. The ground-penetrating radar revealed what we were looking for almost immediately. Beneath the chapel's altar area, about 2 meters down, there was a hollow space roughly the size of a small room. There's definitely something down there, Marie said, studying the readouts. Could be a crypt, could be a hidden chamber. Either way, it's not natural. Is there a way to access it without major excavation? I asked. Let me check for openings. She moved the radar around the perimeter of the anomaly. Here, there's what looks like a vertical shaft leading down from this cluster of stones. We cleared away centuries of accumulated dirt and debris, revealing a circular arrangement of 7 stones, each carved with a rose symbol. In the center was a larger stone that looked like it might be removable. The 7 steps to the rose, Lena murmured. It took all 3 of us to shift the central stone, but beneath it was a narrow stone staircase leading down into darkness. I don't suppose either of you brought flashlights? Marie asked. We had, along with rope, a first aid kit, and enough supplies for a minor archaeological expedition. As we prepared to descend, I caught Lena's hand. Whatever we find down there, I said, we do this right. Full documentation, proper procedures, agreed. And if there's any sign of danger, we get out immediately, also agreed. Marie lowered herself into the opening first, her flashlight beam dancing off stone walls. "It's safe," she called up, "and you're going to want to see this." The chamber beneath the chapel was small but perfectly preserved. The walls were covered in frescoes depicting scenes that definitely weren't standard. Christian imagery, figures in robes studying star charts, groups gathered around tables covered with mystical symbols, and everywhere the seven-petaled rose. But it was what sat in the center of the chamber that made us all stop breathing. A stone altar, and on it, an iron chest about the size of a large book. "Is that?" Lena whispered. "I think so," I said. Marie approached the chest with scientific caution, photographing it from every angle before attempting to open it. The lock had long since corroded away, and the lid lifted with surprising ease. Inside, wrapped in what remained of silk cloth, were 3 items: a leather-bound book, a gold medallion inscribed with symbols, and a rolled parchment sealed with wax. "The book appears to be a grimoire of some kind," Marie said, carefully lifting it out. "Medieval spellwork and mystical practices. This could be incredibly valuable to scholars of occult history." The medallion was beautiful, clearly the work of a master craftsman, with symbols that matched those we'd found on the tarot cards. But it was the sealed parchment that made my hand shake as I held it. "What is it?" Lena asked. I broke the wax seal carefully and unrolled the document. The text was in Latin, but at the top, in a script I recognized from our research, was a single line in French: "Pour mes descendants qui suivront les cartes." "For my descendants who follow the cards." "This is it," I breathed. "This is what my grandmother's deck was leading to." Marie translated the Latin text aloud. "To those who seek wisdom over wealth, knowledge over power, I leave these tools of the ancient arts. May they serve the light and not the darkness. May they unite rather than divide. May they preserve the old ways for future generations who will understand their worth." The document was signed with a name that made my knees weak: Marguerite. "Chundaba, guardian of the rose path, 1487. "Chundaba," I whispered. "Marie, is that a branch of my family tree?" "Yes." Marie's voice was wondering, and apparently yours as well. "Sarah, I think we may be distant cousins." The implications hit me all at once. My grandmother's cards hadn't just been random. Artifacts, they'd been a deliberate inheritance, passed down through generations of women who'd been guardians of this hidden knowledge. And somehow, through 5 centuries and an ocean crossing, they'd led me back to where they belonged. "This is incredible," Lena said, photographing everything with professional thoroughness. "A complete medieval mystical archive, untouched for over 500 years. The academic implications alone." She was interrupted by the sound of footsteps on the stone stairs above us. We all froze, listening. Someone else was in the chapel ruins. "Hello down there," called a familiar voice. "I do hope you found something interesting." "Professor Aldrich." My blood turned to ice. How did he find us? "GPS tracking on my phone, most likely," Lena said grimly. "I should have thought of that." "Lena, my dear, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "Aldrich's." Voice echoed down the stone stairway. "I simply want to see what you've discovered. Surely we can come to some arrangement." Marie looked between Lena and me with growing alarm. "Who is that?" "Someone who's been following our research," I said. "Someone who stole my grandmother's cards and threatened us to get here." "Well," Marie said with surprising calm, "then we'd better make sure he doesn't get what he came for." Before I could ask what she meant, she grabbed the grimoire and medallion and stuffed them into her backpack. The parchment I rolled up and tucked inside my jacket. "There's got to be another way out of here," I whispered. Marie nodded, pointing to shadows at the far end of the chamber. Medieval hiding places always had escape routes. "Help me look." We found it behind one of the frescoes, a narrow passage that led away from the main chamber. But before we could explore it, footsteps began descending the stairs. I'm afraid I must insist, Aldrich called down. You see, I've brought some associates who are rather less patient than I am. Associates. That explained how he'd managed the theft and the break-ins. This wasn't just academic ambition, it was organized crime. The passage behind the fresco was barely wide enough for one person, but it led upward at a steep angle. Marie went first, then me, then Lena. Behind us, we could hear voices in the chamber we'd just abandoned. They were here, someone said in accented English. The radar. Equipment is still running. Find them, Aldrich snapped. They can't have gone far. The passage emerged in a thicket of brambles about 50 meters from the chapel ruins. We crawled out scratched and dirty but free, and Marie immediately led us deeper into the forest. My car is parked on the other side of these woods, she whispered. But we need to move quickly. As we hurried through the trees, I could hear shouts behind us. They'd found the passage. Marie, I said as we ran, I'm sorry we got you involved in this. Are you joking? She grinned fiercely. This is the most excitement I've had since graduate school. Besides, if that man thinks he can steal our family heritage, he's got another thing coming. Our family heritage? Did you think it was coincidence that I happened to be an expert on this exact region, this exact time period? She vaulted over a fallen log with surprising agility. My grandmother told me stories about the Rose Path, about artifacts hidden. During the religious wars, I've been looking for that chapel my entire career. You knew? I suspected. When Lena contacted me about medieval pilgrimage routes in this specific area, mentioned a colleague with French ancestry and historical documents, well, it seemed too much of a coincidence. We reached her car just as we heard the sound of vehicles arriving at the chapel site. Marie started the engine and pulled away quickly but calmly, like someone who'd never been involved in a treasure hunt chase scene in her life. Where are we going? Lena asked. Police station first, Marie said firmly. We need to report the theft of your tarot cards and the threats you've received. Then we need to contact the proper archaeological authorities about what we found. What about the artifacts? Marie patted her backpack. Safe. And they're going to stay that way until we can ensure they end up in the right hands. As we drove toward Tours, I felt a strange sense of completion. The cards were still missing, but we'd found what they'd been pointing toward for 5 centuries. More than that, we'd found family Marie was right about us being distant cousins, connected by women who'd protected ancient knowledge through war and persecution and cultural upheaval. Lena, I said as the countryside rolled past, I have a question, yeah? When this is all over, when we've dealt with Aldrich and gotten the artifacts properly cataloged and studied, what happens to us? She reached over and took my hand. What do you want to happen? I thought about my quiet shop, my predictable life, the way I'd been sleepwalking through the past 5 years. Then I thought about the past few weeks, the excitement of discovery, the thrill of intellectual partnership, the way Lena made me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I want to keep doing this, I said. The research, the collaboration, with you. Even after I nearly got us killed by being careless with sensitive information, especially after that. We're better together than we are apart. She squeezed my hand. I was hoping you'd say that. The rest of the drive passed in comfortable silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. But as we approached the city limits of Tours, Marie's phone rang. She answered with her car's hands-free system. Alla? Marie? The voice was tense, unfamiliar. This is Inspector Dubois with the Tours Police. We need to speak with you immediately. There's been an incident at your hotel. My stomach dropped. What kind of incident? There was a break-in. Your rooms were searched, and we found evidence of an altercation. Are you and your colleagues safe? Marie glanced at us in the rearview mirror. We're safe, Inspector. But we have information about who might be responsible. Good. We'll meet. You at the station. And Marie, be careful. These people appear to be professionals. As we hung up, the weight of what we'd gotten ourselves into finally hit me. This wasn't just academic rivalry or even simple theft. We were dealing with people who were willing to use violence to get what they wanted. Second thoughts? Lena asked quietly. I looked at the rolled parchment in my hands, my ancestors' final message, preserved for 5 centuries until the cards could lead someone back to claim it. Then I looked at Lena, brilliant and passionate and brave enough to follow me into a medieval treasure hunt. Finally, I looked at Marie, my newly discovered cousin who'd risked her safety to help us protect our shared heritage. No, I said, no second thoughts. But I think we need to be a lot more careful about what comes next. The police station in Tours was a bustling place, full of officers dealing with the usual small city problems. Inspector Dubois was a serious man in his 40s who listened to our story with professional skepticism that gradually turned to concern. You're saying this Professor Aldrich has stolen medieval artifacts from America, followed you to France, and is now operating with a team of associates? That's exactly what we're saying, I confirmed. And I have documentation to prove the tarot cards were stolen from my shop. What about the items you found today? Marie placed her backpack on the inspector's desk. These artifacts were discovered in a previously unknown archaeological site. According to proper procedure, they should be turned over to the French Ministry of Culture for evaluation and preservation. And you believe Professor Aldrich will attempt to steal these as well? I'm certain of it, Lena said. He's invested too much in this search to give up now. Inspector Dubois was quiet for a moment, studying the photographs we'd taken of the hidden chamber. This is quite a story. However, we have a problem. What kind of problem? I asked. Professor Aldrich has already been in contact with us. He filed a report this morning claiming that you, Miss Chen, stole valuable historical documents from his university. He has a warrant for your arrest. The room went silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That's impossible, Lena. Sighed. Sarah never had access to university materials. According to Professor Aldrich's statement, Miss Chen gained access to sensitive research through her relationship with Dr. Hartwell, then fled the country with stolen property. The inspector looked apologetic but firm. I'm afraid I have no choice but to detain Miss Chen until this matter can be resolved. Inspector, Marie said quickly, I can personally vouch for both of these women. They're legitimate researchers who've made an important historical discovery. Whatever Professor Aldrich has told you is fabrication designed to cover up his own criminal activity. I understand your position, Dr. Dubois, but I have legal documentation that I must follow. He stood up. Miss Chen, I'm sorry, but you'll need to come with me. This was a nightmare. Aldrich had outmaneuvered us, using the legal system to neutralize the threat we posed while he went after the artifacts we'd found. Inspector, I said, give me 5 minutes to make a phone call. I'm sorry, but please, 5 minutes. It may resolve this entire situation. He considered, then nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized but never used. Officer Martinez, the policeman who'd handled the break-in at my shop. Martinez. Officer Martinez, this is Sarah. Chen, you investigated the theft at my shop last week? Miss Chen, yes. Any new information about the case? Quite a bit. I'm in France, and I've located both the stolen property and the person responsible for the theft. But I need your help. Quickly, I explained the situation, Aldrich's false warrant, our discovery of the medieval cache, the danger we were in. Martinez listened with growing interest. Miss Chen, you're saying Professor Aldrich fabricated evidence to get an international warrant issued? That's exactly what I'm saying. And I can prove it if you can fax the French police the documentation from my original theft report. Hold on. I waited while he checked his files, my heart pounding. Around me, the police station continued its normal rhythm, but I felt like everything was balanced on a knife's edge. Miss Chen, I have the documentation. And you're right there. Our inconsistencies with the warrant request. Professor Aldrich claimed you stole materials from his office, but our report clearly states that items were stolen from your shop. Can you fax that information to the tourist police immediately? Already doing it. Miss Chen, are you in immediate danger? I looked around the police station at Marie and Lena's worried faces, at Inspector Dubois watching me with professional curiosity. I think we're about to find out. The fax arrived 15 minutes later, and Inspector Dubois's attitude changed immediately after reading it. It appears Professor Aldrich has some explaining to do, he said grimly. Miss Chen, you're free to go. In fact, I'd like to request your continued cooperation in investigating this matter. What kind of cooperation? We've had reports of suspicious activity at several archaeological sites in the region over the past few months. If Professor Aldrich is operating with a team of associates, as you suggest, he may be responsible for more than just the theft of your property. You mean he's been treasure hunting across France? It's possible. Medieval artifact theft is a lucrative business, and there are collectors who will pay enormous sums for authenticated pieces. He paused. The question is, how do we catch him in the act? I looked at Lena and Marie, seeing the same thought reflected in their faces. We know where he is, I said slowly, and we know what he's looking for. You want to use yourselves as bait, the inspector said. We want to finish what we started. The artifacts we found today are just the beginning. There are other sites, other caches. If Aldrich has been tracking down medieval mystical artifacts across Europe, then we need to stop him before he destroys irreplaceable historical treasures. Inspector Dubois considered this. It would be dangerous. It's dangerous to let him continue, Burry pointed out. These artifacts represent centuries of hidden knowledge. They belong in museums and universities, not private collections. What exactly are you proposing? I thought about my grandmother's cards, about the 500 years of women who'd protected these secrets, about the responsibility that had somehow fallen to me. We go back to the chapel, I said. But this time we go prepared. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. We would return to the chapel site with proper archaeological equipment and police backup, ostensibly to complete our excavation of the medieval chamber. Aldrich would almost certainly try to interfere, giving the police grounds to arrest him and his associates. The risk was that desperate people do desperate things, and we still didn't know exactly how far Aldrich was willing to go to get what he wanted. We'll have officers positioned throughout the forest, Inspector Dubois explained as we reviewed the plan. Radio contact at all times, emergency signals if you're in immediate danger. But you need to understand if things go wrong, it may take us several minutes to reach you. We understand, Lena said, but this is the only way to end this. As long as Aldrich is free, Sarah's cards are gone forever, and other archaeological sites are at risk. That evening, we stayed at a different hotel under police protection. The artifacts from the chapel were secured in a police vault, and Marie had contacted colleagues at the Sorbonne to begin the authentication process. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said over dinner, we've accomplished something remarkable. That chamber had been lost for over 500 years, and now it's found, I said. The question is whether we can keep it safe. Later, as Lena and I lay in our hotel bed listening to the sounds of the French countryside, she turned to me with a serious expression. Sarah, I need to ask you something. What? If we get your grandmother's cards back, what are you going to do with them? I've been thinking about that question for days. The cards had led me to France, to the discovery of my heritage, to a love I hadn't expected. But they'd also brought danger and violence into my life. I think, I said slowly, that they need to be where they can do the most good. Maybe in a museum, maybe in a university collection, somewhere scholars can study them and learn from them, even though they're your inheritance, especially because they're my inheritance. My ancestor left them to preserve knowledge, not to hoard. I rolled over to face her. What about you? What happens to Dr. Lena Hartwell after all this is over? I think Dr. Lena Hartwell might be ready for a change of scenery, maybe a transfer to a different university, maybe a partnership with a certain expert in historical tarot analysis. That could be arranged. She kissed me softly. Good, because I'm not done discovering things with you. The next morning dawned clear and bright perfect, weather for what might be our final confrontation with Professor Aldrich. We drove back to the chapel site with a full archaeological team and discreet police backup positioned throughout the surrounding forest. The chapel ruins looked peaceful in the morning light, giving no hint of the drama that had played out there the day before. But as we set up our equipment, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Remember, Inspector Dubois said through our radio earpieces, document everything, stay in the open, and at the first sign of trouble, signal for backup. We spent the morning conducting a proper excavation of the hidden chamber, cataloging every artifact and symbol we'd missed in our hasty escape the day before. The frescoes alone were going to revolutionize understanding of medieval mystical practices. It was just afternoon when they appeared. Professor Aldrich emerged from the forest with 3 men I didn't recognize, all of them armed with what looked like professional hiking gear and serious expressions. Dr. Hartwell, Aldrich called out cheerfully as if he were greeting colleagues. At an academic conference. Miss Chen, Dr. Dubois, what a pleasure to see you all again. Professor Aldrich, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Come to apologize for stealing my property? Stealing is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as preserving important historical artifacts from improper handling. He approached our excavation site with obvious curiosity. And what have we discovered here? Another cache of medieval mysticism. Nothing that concerns you, Marie said firmly. Oh, but I think it does concern me. You see, I've spent years researching the Rose Path network. I know there are multiple sites, multiple caches. This little chapel is just the beginning. The beginning of what? Aldrich's smile turned cold. The beginning of the most significant archaeological discovery of the 21st century. Medieval mystical artifacts hidden for 5 centuries, worth millions to the right collectors, enough to fund a very comfortable retirement. You're talking about selling priceless historical artifacts to private collectors, Lena said with disgust. And talking about being practical. Do you know how much universities pay adjunct professors? How little recognition we get for decades. Oh, for research? His academic mask slipped, revealing the bitterness underneath. I've given my life to medieval studies, and what do I have to show for it? A tiny office, a modest salary, and the promise of an even more modest pension. So you decided to become a thief? I decided to take what I'd earned. He gestured to his associates who began moving to surround our excavation site. Now I'm going to need you to hand over whatever you found in that chamber yesterday. This was it. I pressed the emergency signal on my radio and hoped Inspector Dubois was as close as he'd promised. The artifacts are in police custody, I said. Even if we wanted to give them to you, we couldn't. I think you're lying. Aldrich nodded to one of his men, who pulled out what was definitely not hiking equipment. It was a gun. I think you have them right here, and I think you're going to hand them over right now. The forest around us was suddenly very quiet. Too quiet. Professor, Lena said carefully, this has gone far enough. You're talking about armed robbery now. Assault. These aren't academic crimes. These are felonies that will destroy your career and put you in prison. My career was already destroyed the moment you two started interfering with my research. He was sweating now, despite the cool air. Do you have any idea how long I've been tracking the Rose Path connections? How many sites I've located? How many sites you've looted, you mean, Marie said. Preserved. I've preserved them from bureaucratic incompetence and academic politics. His voice was rising, the careful professor mask completely gone now. And I would have continued to preserve them if you hadn't stumbled into my research with your amateur treasure hunting. Amateur? I felt anger overriding fear. Professor, I've got news for you. We found more in one day than you found in months of research, and we did it without stealing anyone's property or threatening anyone's life. You found it because I led you to it. Your grandmother's cards were worthless until I showed you how to read them properly. My grandmother's cards were a 500-year-old inheritance that you stole from my shop. And if you think I'm going to let you profit from, I was interrupted by the sound of rustling in the forest around us. Aldrich's associates immediately went on alert, weapons drawn. Inspector Dubois, I presume. Aldrich called out, "Please don't make this more complicated than it needs to be." "Professor Aldrich," came the inspector's voice from the trees, "you're surrounded. Put down your weapons and step away from the civilians." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Inspector. You see, these civilians have something that belongs to me. They have artifacts that belong to the French people. Cultural heritage that you've been systematically looting." Looting is such an ugly word. The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then one of Aldrich's men made a mistake. He moved to get a better position and stepped directly into the line of sight of a police sniper. What happened next was chaos. Police emerged from the forest. Aldrich's men scattered, and somehow, in the confusion, Aldrich himself grabbed me and dragged me toward the ruins of the chapel. "Let her go," Lena shouted, but Aldrich had positioned himself behind me with a knife at my throat. "I think not. Miss Chen and I are going to have a little discussion about the location of those artifacts." "They're in police custody," I said. Again, trying to keep my voice steady despite the knife at my neck. "I can't give you what I don't have. But you can give me information. You can tell me about the other sites, the other cards in the network. Your grandmother's deck was just one part of a larger collection, wasn't it?" My blood ran cold. He was right. The document we'd found mentioned other guardians, other hiding places. If there were other people out there with cards like mine, I don't know anything about other sites. I think you do. I think that parchment you found yesterday contains more information than you've shared with the police. He was fishing, but he was fishing in the right direction. The parchment did mention other guardians, other locations, but I'd hidden that information from everyone except Lena and Marie. "What did it say?" I smiled, thinking about Marguerite Chen Debut, the woman who'd started this 500-year treasure hunt. It said, "May love guide you to wisdom, and wisdom guide you home." "Love and wisdom," Lena repeated thoughtfully. "I like that. Me too." As we settled into sleep, I thought about the journey ahead, dozens of sites to explore, centuries of hidden knowledge to uncover, academic papers to write, and discoveries to share. It would be dangerous sometimes, frustrating, often, but always exciting. And I wouldn't be doing it alone. The next morning, we stood once again beside the stone circle, watching Marie coordinate with colleagues across Europe, while a team of local archaeologists began the careful work of fully documenting the site. Dr. Chen called one of the students. "We found something." At the base of the central stone, hidden beneath centuries of accumulated soil, was a small metal box. Inside, wrapped in oiled leather that had somehow survived 700 years, was a single item, a tarot card. Not just any card, the lovers reversed. In traditional interpretation, the lovers reversed meant separation, conflict, poor choices. But as I held the ancient card up to the Highland sunlight, I saw something different. This wasn't about separation, it was about choice. About choosing love over fear, wisdom over ignorance, partnership over isolation. What does it mean? One of the students asked. I looked at Lena, brilliant and beautiful in the morning light. I looked at Marie, my newfound cousin and academic partner. I looked at the team of researchers we'd assembled, all of us united by curiosity and the desire to uncover truth. It means, I said, that some choices are easy to make. And with that, we began our next adventure.